The Edmonton Oilers are off to an 0-3 start. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we try and dive into some solutions.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So today's episode is building off of Monday's edition. So if you haven't listened to yesterday's show, I highly recommend you go and take the time to go back because we're building our themes for the season out. And on today's show, this is a metaphor, a comparison I use a lot when we talk about hockey. I often compare hockey to the human body, that hockey has offense, defense, special teams, and goaltending. The human body, muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons. I know there's more than that, but for the purposes of this metaphor, that's what we're working with. And to build that out more, our first segment, we're going to talk just a little bit more about that idea of why when things go bad, it snowballs very quickly. We'll talk about it in the framing of Murphy's Law. The second segment, we're going to talk about why the Oilers' preferred style of play can often be self-defeating when they're in these ruts. And then our final segment, we'll take a brief conversation on the Oilers' special teams so far, their penalty kill and power play through 3 games. So think about it like this. Hockey is a free-flowing liquid state game. For the most part, most of the game's decisions happen in a free-flowing, open-ended state. It is not nearly as structured as football. It is not nearly as rigid as baseball. There are similarities to lacrosse, to basketball, as far as the number of players, the movement styles, some of the spacing. But the interpretation of the game in hockey is really on the individual level. And you can see in real time as the game is playing, the players who are having to take a half second to make a decision versus the ones who are able to make an instinctual decision. And right now, the Oilers are a compromised entity. And what I mean by that, and I'm going to loop back to what we just said a minute ago, the Oilers have 4 components to their team: offense, defense, special teams, goaltending. And right now, their offense is not doing enough, which is putting strain on their defense, which is putting a strain on their goaltending, which is putting a strain on their special teams. All of this is interconnected. And the real life example I'm going to give you is Christian McCaffrey, the San Francisco 49ers running back. Last year, McCaffrey, outstanding regular season, scored a touchdown in something ludicrous like 12 straight games, came close to 20 touchdowns as a running back, had almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage. But he did that with a calf injury. And if you're familiar with human anatomy, you look down at your leg, you feel your calf on the back of the lower half of your leg, right down to your Achilles, right down to the back of your foot. And because Christian McCaffrey suffered a calf strain, he had to adjust the way he was running, had to adjust the way he was walking. And in doing that, it compromised his Achilles tendon. And his Achilles tendon, which he's been dealing with a bout of tendonitis, because of that, he hasn't played a single snap in the regular season this year. He didn't play in the preseason, and it's up in the air when he will return to the 49ers. And I know this is a hockey podcast, but I wanted to give you a tangible, real-life example of a player overcompromising because one component of their body isn't working right or is injured, and the strain that puts on the rest of the body. And we talked about it yesterday. As much as the Oilers' defense needs to play better and as much as the goaltending could be doing them some favors, the Oilers as a team are fundamentally oriented around scoring out of their problems. Some teams, it's lockdown defense. Some teams, it's their goaltending. Some teams, it's their special teams. For Edmonton, it is winning at 5-on-5, and it is dominating on special teams. They know, the Oilers are aware that if the difference between winning and losing in games is their defense and their goaltending, they're going to have a significantly harder time than they would if they were able to lean on the other components of their game. And when you think about that, It sounds very reductionist and zero sum, which I try not to be. But the Oilers are fundamentally built. Their roster is set up in a way where if the goal scoring isn't there, they are not going to win a lot of hockey games. And like we talked about in depth on yesterday's show, at 5-on-5, the Oilers are shooting 2-point-something%. They are shooting they are scoring on less than 3% of their shots. We said on yesterday's show, the Oilers would need to shoot 280 something more shots on goal to just get to 9 even strength goals, which is the amount of even strength goals they've conceded through 3 games. And I understand the special teams will come along, and we're going to talk about that more in the third segment as far as the power play, the penalty kill, the goal differentials on those ends. But right now, the Oilers are spinning their tires in the mud. They are engrossed in a case of Murphy's Law, where anything that can go wrong is going wrong. The Oilers are a supremely talented hockey team. I would argue they are maybe the most or second most talented team in the entire NHL. But because not everything is going swimmingly right now, they are feeling strains on their roster in a way that they cannot overcome them right now. As much as we all agree the defense needs to be better, in particular the Darnell Nurse pair, whether it's Dermott, whether it's Stetcher, whether it's Emberson, whoever draws back in tonight against the Flyers, we'll see who gets in there. But at some level, we all know who has to pick up the load here. If the offense is not scoring, the defense is not good enough to play perfect. And that's the thing. We talked about this a lot in the postseason during the course of the Oilers Stanley Cup final run, that if you make Stuart Skinner be the difference between winning and losing, you're probably going to lose a lot of nights. That's not a knock on Stuart Skinner. That is a knock on the way the Oilers roster is set up. They are positioned in a way where they can really only win playing one style of hockey. They really only can win when they can turn games into up and down and skill contests. Right now, the Oilers are swimming against the current. And what I mean by that is if you've ever gone to the beach, you'll often see signs that say, look out for riptides. And if you get sucked into one, you have to swim parallel to the beach and get out of the riptide. Because if you try and swim against the tide, you are going to continually lose ground and be thrown out further to the sea. And the Oilers are clearly pressing. And we talked about that a lot on yesterday's show. When you are in your own head as far as we need to score, we need to score, we need to score, you're gripping your stick a little bit too tight. You're taking your eye off of the puck when you're lining up one-timers. You're not getting as accurate of a shot as you want because you're not as focused as you need to be. And I'm going to use an old adage here that I've had more than one coach tell me in my life when I was a kid playing hockey, playing soccer, whatever sport I was playing where you scored goals. There's no such thing as a 5-goal goal. As much as the Oilers need to get their offense going, pressing harder is not going to necessarily score you more goals. Settling for those point shots, those top of the circle shots, those low quality scoring chances, settling for those is going to put you in, and it's going to put you in a self-defeating cycle where you know you need to score, but because you're hunting that 5-goal goal, the mythical goal that's going to break the dam, you're only putting yourself in a more disadvantageous position because your opponents are going to start to read that desperation. They are going to block shooting lanes. They are going to allow you. They are going to give you shooting lanes, but they're going to be from bad areas. They're going to be from the top of the circles. They're going to be from the point. They're going to be from the half wall so that they have time to get in the way defensively and their goalie has time to get over post to post. We are going to take our first break on today's show. When we come back, we're going to dive into why the Oilers' preferred style of play is working against them as they are in this funk. Coming up next on this edition of Locked On Oilers. NFL fans, you can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. This week in the NFL on Thursday Night Football, we've got the Sean Payton Bowl, the Denver Broncos going down to New Orleans to take on the Saints. The Broncos 1.5-point home favorites. Another London game this week, the Patriots and Drake May coming off of a pretty solid NFL debut, heading to Jacksonville to take on former #1 overall pick Trevor Lawrence. The Jaguars 5.5-point favorites over in London. My favorite game of the weekend, though, at least on paper, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans heading on up to Green Bay to take on Jordan Love. The Packers are 2.5-point favorites there. And of course, the Saquon Barkley Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles and Barkley coming to MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Football Giants, who only scored 7 points on Sunday Night Football against the Bengals last week. The Giants, 3.5-point home underdogs. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started and get in on the action. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are diving into the Oilers' woes. And I said this a ton on Monday's episode, and I'm going to repeat it right now if you didn't get a chance to listen to it. There are 79 games to go. The Oilers are going to score some goals. I understand it is very frustrating to see the Oilers get off to a slow start for the second straight year. I outlined a few weeks ago why I thought this was in the cards, why it would make sense if it happened. And pretty much everything I thought was going to happen, at least from a problem perspective, has come to fruition. The defense has struggled mightily, but, and this is an illusion that's kind of hard to make if you're not familiar with football, so stay with me here. The Oilers are built on playing with a lead. And what I mean by that is when the Oilers are trailing or they're in a tie game, they have a lot more responsibility. And when I say they, I should have used a better sentence structure there. It puts a lot more pressure on their defense because when they are trailing, when they are in a tie game, their margin for error is smaller. When you're playing with the lead, that's where the Oilers can bury you. Because when you are the team that is desperate against them, when you are in the gotta score situations, that's where you're going to start to get 3-4 players even below the circles in the offensive zone. And all the Oilers need to do in that case is recover a loose puck, get a defenseman to spring a forward in transition, and then you have a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, and that's where the Oilers can really get to work. And that is the crux of this second segment here. The Oilers are a transition team. And what do I mean by that? So in hockey, we define a rush scoring chance as a scoring chance that happens within 2 seconds of entering the offensive zone. Those scoring chances, rush-based scoring chances, are typically of a higher quality because like we said at the out when we were just establishing, that is typically a situation where the other team, the defensive team, has not had ample time to regroup in the neutral zone. That means you have an opportunity to build up speed, and when you're skating with speed, the natural reaction as a defender is going to be to skate backwards, is going to be to keep the puck carrier in front of you and force them to skate at you. And there are conflicting schools of thought as to whether or not that's the right way to attack an odd man number advantage. There are some people who would preach to play a little more aggressively, to use your stick to try and force a pass. That way the goalie ends up having to make the decision and the defender turns it into more of an even matchup where if it's a 2-on-1 and the defenseman steps up and uses their stick to force the puck carrier to move the puck, that is typically where you would expect the goalie to play the pass, and the goalie is going to be able to make more of a 2-on-1 decision. Whereas if the defenseman keeps skating backwards, the two attacking players can use the puck to go laterally and get both the defenseman and the goalie to move. That's why we typically tell our defensemen, you need to make a decision so you give your goalie a chance. The longer you wait to make a decision as far as pressuring the puck carrier, the more responsibility you're putting on your goalie to be able to play either shooter, as opposed to if you attack the one puck carrier, it forces the puck to go to the other attacking player, and that in turn makes the goalie's job easier. Now, building out on that further, the problem and the reason it's hard for the Oilers to get out of this funk right now is this rush-based attack, getting speed, attacking the zone. You only realistically get 1, maybe 2 scoring chances off of the rush. And because you only get 1 or 2 chances off of the rush, that in turn gives the defending team ample opportunity to recover the loose puck, regroup, and go the other way. And what we just said about attacking with speed rings true here. If the Oilers are attacking in a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, and they are crashing the net, and that defenseman makes the mistake, and the pass goes across, and they make a shot, and the attacking player makes a shot on goal, and the goalie makes the save, the goalie can kill the play, make the save clean, hold it, and we get a face-off. the puck ricochets, caroms out, and it's either a recovery for the attacking team, which in this case we're talking about Edmonton. But most of the time, when you don't score in that 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, it becomes a lot easier for the defending team to recover the puck and transition going back to offense. And because of that, that typically means you're going to have a numbers advantage for the team that's recovering and going back to offense. So think about it like this. If the Oilers are attacking the net with speed and they've got a 3-on-2 and their shooter misses the net or the goalie makes the save, one of the defensemen recovers the loose puck and is able to get it going the other way. But because it was a 3-on-2, that means the Oilers have 3 players below the circles. That means the defending team should have 3 forwards who are somewhere in the defensive zone to execute the breakout, but that gives them a numbers advantage going back the other way against the Oilers defensemen. And like we've said all summer long, the key to the Oilers this season is going to be playing as little defense as possible, and being a rush-based offense puts more responsibility on the defense because they have to make split-second decisions as far as, do I need to pinch here to keep this puck in the offensive zone, or do I need to drop back to look out for my partner, look out for my goalie, and try and slow them down in transition to give my forwards enough time to catch back up in the play. And this is where McDavid and Draisaitl's defensive liabilities do come out and become a bit more glaring, because you're not scoring right now. You are not scoring enough to mitigate what you are giving back defensively. Because McDavid, because Draisaitl are so supremely talented, they're going to get the puck closer to the net. But because the puck's closer to the net, that means they're further away from their own goal. That means they need to skate harder on the back check to get back into the play. That means they need to work harder during the course of the game. And I know this is going to drive some people crazy as I say this, but you have to pick and choose your spots as a high skill player. I understand that you're never going to get Selke caliber defense out of McDavid or Draisaitl. That's not reasonable, and I wouldn't expect it. I frankly am okay with them giving back defensively as far as what they concede, because they generate so much offense. But right now, with so much not working offensively, them giving back so much defensively is really hurting the Oilers. And look, as I said at the start of this second segment, all of these problems are going to be resolved. The Oilers are going to start to score goals. I imagine they're going to start to score goals in bunches. And this conversation is going to have a different tenor. Yes, there are still going to be things the defense needs to work out. The defense is not particularly good right now. And yes, a lot of it is just that second pair of whoever's playing with Darnell Nurse, whether it's Dermott, Stetcher, or Emerson. One of those 3 is going to need to solidify themselves next to Nurse, or the Oilers, as I've said a lot the last few weeks, they're going to have to suck it up and break up their first pair and play Bouchard with Nurse and Ekholm with that, whichever right-handed guy they can't play with Nurse, just to distribute the load a little bit. Because right now, that first pair is going great. The problem is that first pair goes great and it's on the ice at the same time as McDavid, which means their minutes are not as grueling. But because of that, it means Nurse is playing with Emerson, Stetcher, or Dermott. And those minutes, they're getting minutes with either Henrique or with Draisaitl. And those lines do not control possession nearly as well as the McDavid line, and it puts more responsibility on the defense. We are going to take our second and final break on today's show. When we come back, we are going to talk a little bit about the Oilers special teams, so be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. Your intimate life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through HIMS, you can get a personalized ED treatment without ever stepping foot outside your door. HIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable Hardmans, Viagra, and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visit. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMS can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's hims.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers ahead of the Oilers showdown with the Philadelphia Flyers on Tuesday night up in Alberta. So, the Oilers are a supremely talented hockey. They feature two of the 6 best forwards in the entire world. They have a top 10 defenseman, in my opinion, in Evan Bouchard. They have a former 50 goal scorer in Zach Hyman, a former 100-point forward in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They have the most talented third-line center of the McDavid-Draisaitl regime in Adam Henrique. They have Jeff Skinner, who can score 30 goals. They have Victor Arvidsson, who should be close to 50 to 60 points this season. There is more than enough talent here and more than enough of a sample size to indicate that the Oilers are just having a bit of a bad run. And nowhere, in my opinion, is that more apparent than on special teams. I talked about this in depth on yesterday's show, but I wanted to bring it back around because I don't think I got my point fully across. The Oilers, and I shouldn't say the Oilers, special teams in hockey in general are very, very volatile. And what I mean by that, all it takes is one aspect of a special teams unit to get hot, and then really quickly you can string together some impressive performances. We think all the time about some of the great heaters in the history of the NHL. You think about Draisaitl parking himself at the bottom of the right-hand circle for the one-timer on the power play. And there are times where it just feels academic, that no matter what, the Oilers are going to score because of that. Or last year during the Stanley Cup playoffs where they played 25 postseason games and they only conceded a penalty kill goal against 4 times. When you have that dominant of a penalty kill as a team that's not great defensively, it provides some balance. And look, right now, they are in the auditioning process. We talked a lot during the preseason about finding the right mix, especially for those penalty kill units, because that was one of the few areas where there was some reasonable conjecture and there were multiple candidates for the roles. Now, I understand Darnell Nurse is not coming off of the penalty kill. I don't think anything about his game other than his size particularly situates him well for the penalty kill. And I understand the Oilers aren't in a position where they can afford to ask McDavid or Draisaitl to kill penalties to try and take some of the workload off of the defense, even though that's something that some teams do, where they use the penalty kill as an opportunity to get their best players more ice time to win those minutes as well. The Oilers are making a very conscious and tactical decision to limit the workload for both McDavid and Draisaitl in the regular season in hopes of having them fresher for the postseason down the road. But right now, the Oilers need to find some stability on the back end, and that's at 5-on-5, and that's on the penalty kill. Until you figure out which defenseman works the best with Darnell Nurse, we're going to keep revolving around. We are going to keep a revolving door of candidates. I have no issue with Ekholm and Kulak on the penalty kill. Both have skill sets that translate reasonably well. I would understand that the Oilers don't want to put Bouchard out there because his defensive game, even though he's a very strong mover of the puck, he is not particularly gifted defensively in terms of taking up space, playing the puck, or clearing the crease. Excuse me, I shouldn't say playing the puck. Recovering or winning loose pucks is what I meant when I said that, as far as winning the puck in the corners or taking the puck away from opposing players. Bouchard's strength is obviously his skating, getting in good position, and then moving the puck where it needs to go. But he is not going to be mistaken for some Joel Edmondson win the puck in the corners type and get it to the puck mover. That said, the Oilers' penalty kill needs to be better. They've conceded 4 penalty kill goals against already through 3 games. And with that in mind, it is a real reflection on the Murphy's Law right now, on the Murphy's Law principle that they are dealing with, in that everything the Oilers kind of need to break their way right now, based on how they're playing, is not happening. They are not scoring enough. which means the defense has to play better. Because the defense has to play better, there is an increased scrutiny and an increased focus on the mistakes they do make. Because of that, when they make mistakes, it becomes incumbent upon Stuart Skinner to elevate his game, and he's just not that type of goalie. I think Stuart Skinner is more than adequate as far as an NHL caliber starter. I think I have no reservations in my mind about saying Stuart Skinner is an above average NHL starter. That said, he's not Shesterkin, he's not Saros, he's not Demko, he's not Jeremy Swayman, he's not Olmark, he's not Bobrovsky, he's not Vasilevsky. He's an above average goalie. He can make some difficult saves from time to time, but if he is the difference between the Oilers winning and losing, more often than not, they're probably going to lose. He's capable of getting on a nice little heater. You saw it in the playoffs, especially against the Stars, where he outplayed Jake Ottinger, who has a really strong amateur background, and even though he's been in the NHL for a few years, he had a really good playoff series 3 years ago, but he's really struggled to recapture that form. So for Skinner to outplay Jake Ottinger, and during the summer, I was making the argument that there was a really good case for Stuart Skinner to be one of the two goalies for Team Canada during the Four Nations face-off this upcoming spring, but I want to see the Oilers find a way to get going. And that doesn't mean they need to score 7 goals tonight against the Flyers. That said, if there were a team to pot 5 or 6 goals against, the Flyers are not a particularly strong defensive team. The one thing I will say about the Flyers before we wrap up on today's show, they are a cycle team. They will grind you. They will dump and chase you, and they will force your defensemen to make decisions. The Oilers' defensemen's decision-making has been part of their issue so far. I expect the Oilers to get off the schneid tonight to beat Philadelphia, but that's why they got to go out there and play the game. I will talk to you guys tomorrow after the Oilers-Flyers game. Until then, let's go Oilers. And real quick, I forgot my spiel. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, I saw 1,600 subscribers. I know it's back down to like 1,593 or whatever. I don't know if bot accounts got audited off of or whatever, but if you could be so kind, please subscribe over on YouTube, like the video, hit the alarm bell so you get a notification whenever new content goes live. Leave me a comment. Let me know, what do you think the Oilers' key to get going tonight against the Flyers is? I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.